Good morning. This is Talking Devils. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined by Manchester United legend Paul Parker and David Murphy. Whenever I tag him on the end of introducing Paul first, it makes it sound like Dave's a Manchester United legend. He, in fact, did not play for the club. I don't want to get sued on the Trades Description Act. Morning, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Wayne.
Dave, how are you doing?
Fantastic.
Nice of you to grace us with your presence. It's been a while, then.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, been a little bit busy. Been doing some work travel. Yeah, missed all those fantastic victories to talk about them, and the couple of draws. So, but I'm back for the defeat. So let's get it going.
Yeah, this is the one where you can go like, I told you so at the end of it. You didn't have any chance to sort of hop in the meantime. Yeah, look, got a very, very difficult game to speak about. Manchester United 0, Everton 1. Go through the run of the match first. Obviously, we'll talk about the selection. We'll talk about the substitutes. And we'll talk about the manager. And we'll talk about the progress that he's made after a year in charge. But we'll talk about the run of the game first and the events of the game therein. United 0, Everton 1. Started the game sloppily. Everton looked, they looked defensive, but they looked like breaking with intent, which, like United, as they've tended to do under Amorim quite a lot, like we're doing a lot of plodding in the middle of the park without doing anything convincing at the back or anything convincing up front. So Everton knew where they could find joy. That's the one thing about David Moyes. He's been around the block in the Premier League. He knows how to play against certain teams. United are not particularly evasive with their weaknesses, are they? You know what they are. They can be spotted and they can be exploited, as they often are, and they were again. United started mainly due to injury. We'll give Amorim the benefit of the doubt with that. Mainly due to injury, we had a lot of defenders in that team and not a lot of options from the bench either. Joshua Zirkzee starting up front. And it didn't create an awful lot. No Matthias Cunha. I'm not quite sure what happened to him. He had a minor injury that ruled him out of turning on the Christmas lights in Altrincham, but it ruled him out of the game as well. Which was slightly more important. United had tried to quell that. I think the story had got out where they didn't want it to be out. Anyway, he wasn't playing, and United just didn't get going. You thought, all right, well, when Everton had this bizarre sending off after about 10 minutes, where Idrissa Garnagay had this set to, I'm still quite not sure what happened, because I was sitting there. We saw that they'd sort of like had to be pulled apart, Pickford and Gay, and Michael Keane was involved as well. We had no idea what was going on. The referee went and pulled his red card out, and he went off the pitch. He thought, all right, well, United, when United have looked their best, it's either been against a weak team that's played the same formation as United. I'm thinking Steaua Bucharest or FC SB, as they're now known. When they played the 3-4-3 and United wiped the floor with them because it was so easy to play against. Or when they've played against 10 men. But problem is that United still have this group of players, which is, if you call them scratching the surface when you change 2 or 3 players, and these are the players that you're left with. And yeah, so this was a problem that United had. Couldn't get going. Created a couple of long-range efforts through Bruno Fernandes. They had this chance with Zirkzee right at the end, but they didn't deserve anything from the game, and they got exactly what they deserved. Everton, actually, probably, if they'd have put a little bit more into it, they could have probably got a second goal if they'd shown a little bit more ambition, but they didn't need to. They were very comfortable. Great goal it was as well by Dewsbury Hall. That's the run of the game, Paul. Like I said, we'll talk about the selection, we'll talk about the manager, we'll talk about the progress later, but on the game itself, United can have no complaints.
No, I think you said a lot of it there, to be honest. I mean, I don't know how. Well, it looked like they didn't know how to play against 10 men.
Yeah.
You just pass and pass. You move the ball quickly. That's what you do against 10 men. There's not a lot of coaching about that. You're not sluggish. 1 and 2 touch, get to wide areas, you deliver early. But they never done any of that. Everything was slow, sluggish, get wide, threaten across, come back. It was ponderous. It was reminiscent of what we've seen a year ago and before.
Yeah.
Everything was it was going backwards when we all had a feeling that's moving forward slowly, but there wasn't anything you can take away from that game because there wasn't enough in it. There wasn't anything positive that come out of it, of individuals or collectively. To be honest with you, it looked like a lot of players who were very fearful in what they were trying to do, to be perfectly honest. And when you needed them to be brave in that last 15, 20 minutes of the second half, when they did have a lot of the ball, there was still a lot of backwards and sideward passes.
Yeah, very. It's just such a very, very difficult game to analyse because of how poor United were. In terms of what was the structure, what were they intending to do, and like I said, we'll talk about the manager and the system in a moment. But Dave, on the run of the game, I mean, look, can't complain that Everton deserved the win. United had chances, but not enough to, against 10 men, just didn't do enough. It was, some people are saying it's the worst. The first half was one of the worst halves that they've seen. I'm not quite sure if I'm there, but I don't know if I was just shocked by how poor it was. What was your take on the performance?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the first minute, Everton looked like the team that was up for this game. It didn't look like we were that interested. We were very, very flat. After a recent run of good results, to me it seemed like the attitude was we only had to turn up. That's the way it was, and it got even worse when they went down to 10 men. It was an absolute disaster of a game. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest. We were not playing 2 games, 3 games a week. It is up there with one of the worst halves I've seen in United in a very, very long time. There's just no way forward, unfortunately, with this manager. The team is flat. They don't take chances, which is a shocking thing to have as a manager of Manchester United, is to not take chances. He just didn't do anything. Like when they went down to 10 men, he kept the system the way it was. We can talk a little bit later about that, about how many defenders were still on the pitch when they went down to 10 men. It was just so flat. It just, players were just, like I said, it looked like an end of season game in the first half. A year later, on the anniversary of his first game, and that team that was out there last night, that performance that was out there, it was worse than the team Ten Hag got sacked for. It's so poor. It really is. And here we are, like a full year later, and we're still no further on. We've actually gone backwards. Everton, fair play to them. They came. I won't say they dug in. They dug in maybe for the last 20 minutes, but even when they went down to 10 men, they were a better team. It looked like we were the one that had like 10 or 9 players. Yeah. They as Paul said, we just kept going backwards. We were doing these side passing. Everton were the only one up till about probably 60, 70 minutes that still wanted to go on and win that game. United it was really, really poor. Now, the players, and you guys know, I've been saying this for a long time. I don't think Amaran is the right man for this job, but the players have to take a lot of responsibility for that match last night. It lacked motivation by a lot of players, and even Bruno Fernandes. The only one that for me probably put in a bit of a stint up and down was Ahmad. I think at times he was a little bit selfish, but he was the only one that seemed to want to win that game last night. The rest of them, and you can't put that on the manager. The motivation wasn't there. It really wasn't. And again, it was absolutely shocking performance. I wasn't expecting that, considering the results we've had recently. The team he put out, we're without Cunha, we're without Šeško. You can see last night what we missed. Cunha's not there. There was no one running around. There was no one, biting at heels. So whatever he lacks in not scoring goals, Cunha, he makes up in abundance in what he gives us all over the park. But that performance last night was absolutely dreadful.
Before we talk about the selection, before we talk about the changes, how much on the players, Paul? Dave's gone in there saying the players take responsibility. You've been in situations where managers have changed and systems have changed, formations have changed, and you've been asked to play something slightly different. We've talked. I said maybe a couple of weeks ago on the pod, I said I felt like one of the biggest steps forward that we didn't look like strangers in this formation anymore. But last night we certainly did. It looked like a massive step back. So how much of the how much of the criticism that should rest with the players this morning?
I think quite a lot of it, to be perfectly honest, because there was no effort. There was not effort. There was no energy. And Dave just said there about Cunha. Cunha adds energy. If he was playing last night, there would be a different approach, because he would have forced issues by the way he plays, and he can't. And that's the way he is. He reminds me in the way he plays, different players, but he's like Park. He just plays with so much energy, and and things go wrong, and he gives it. He does that like he's annoyed at himself, and he tries to put it right. And sometimes you think to yourself, stop, slow down, but you can't take that away from him. He changes the game. He adds something. He would have been a threat to Everton, because they'd be always worried about him running beyond, and he's got that mental strength that tells him that he's stronger than everybody. He wants to fight everybody. There was no great fight, and Bueno missed him as well, because he was on his own as such up there. There was no one else to take someone away, no one else to maybe Tarkowski to take him away, so he could be up against the other centre half in Bueno. Ahmad, over the 90 minutes, was United's best player, because he was a threat. And as Dave said, yes, sometimes he's being greedy, but sometimes you look at it, is he saying, well, he can't do anything, I've got to do it on my own? That's those kind of players do sometimes when they look at other players who don't want to take responsibility. And I think that's what it was. There was a lot of players who never took responsibility last night. That's what it boils down to. Euro, and then you can keep talking about 20 years of age. He's played a lot of top end football, and how many times he passed forwards? I think you can count them. Well, you can count actually on your fingers. It was quite poor. He didn't want to take responsibility when it was there for him to go and do it last night.
Yeah. So on the selection itself, like the first team, we'll put out a slightly different idea of putting Ahmad on the left with Cunha out. Can sort of see the method in that, I suppose. Even though he trusts Mount, I don't see why Mount or Mainu wouldn't have been given that run there, and maybe Ahmad playing a bit further back, especially after the sending off. But the starting lineup. I think for everyone, it's about the reaction, especially when they went down to 10. And we'll talk about that, because the system wasn't working against 11 anyway, because Everton started well. You could tell that, and because it was too defensive, there was too many defenders in that team. And Everton already typical Moyes team. They're stubborn, they're resilient, they sit back. It's not quite Tony Pulis or Jose Mourinho style of non-apologetic defensiveness. When they just sit back and they go there's a tiny little bit of ambition in there, but there's a pragmatism in Moyes' teams that always is centered around getting the best of what he's got, whereas United seem to be on a journey to make out the worst of what they've got in they lopside the team with quality that they don't have, and they under egg it in the areas where they've got quality. And the case in point is obviously what happened after sending off, because United at some points were left with these 5 or 6 defenders. Everton was sat back with everyone apart from one player up front, and United couldn't find a breakthrough at all. There was that one moment in the first half where Ahmad went through a few players, but the rest of it was mostly shooting from distance. And Bruno's, I think he had 2 efforts from range where he was you could see he was actually frustrated with the effort. It's I'm going to have to shoot from here because this is what I'm reduced to. But there was nothing. There was nothing from the manager. Everything was like for like again. He was never changing the system, and it wasn't working 11 against 11. I don't know why you would persevere with that, because the point is to overload. And like Dave said earlier, because of the way that United played, because of the formation, because of how defensive that they were, and how pragmatic they were, it made Everton look like they had more players. I don't know how they managed to do that when it was 10 against 11. It actually looked the other way, and I think that's a massive red flag for United, because then they weren't reactive enough. They didn't make that. It was like for like, and I'm not a big fan of like certain things, like throwing players under the bus. I'm not saying he did that with Kobe, but I think it's very difficult to say that you can't play Kobe and Bruno together for weeks, but then when you're in a disaster of a scenario, that's the situation that you make. Bring him on for a defender. Bring Kobe on for a defender. Let Casemiro sit where he's sitting. If you just let him sit a little bit deeper, let Kobe have a little bit more freedom up thing. But you're asking too much of him. You've already said that you don't trust him in that position. You don't play him in that position. But to me, these are the classic signs of a manager under pressure, because they revert against things that they've said that they'll do, and it puts the emphasis on the players. And like Kobe was left with no chance. I didn't think he played particularly well when he came on, but I don't think he was given any chance, like especially when he's not being given any game time. And I think it's an horrible situation to put him in. You've obviously got Joshua Zirkzee, who was a player that he inherited. He's not a player that he's brought in, but he's also said Obi's not ready. So he's already been criticised. I'll talk about the way the manager talks as well in a little bit, but I just felt he's not reacted well enough. He's not that system. Any football system. Sorry, Paul. I keep saying system. I'm just saying because it's the word of the so easiest way to articulate it for the audience. The formation is not set up. Every formation should be set up to positionally dominate an opponent, right? This one only works against weaker opponents, usually when they're playing the same shape. Doesn't ever work in a proactive environment, apart from, ironically, in the big games, because it's nicely situated to do that. In these kind of games, it never works. And the ludicrous thing for me was that when we went to, and I said ludicrous, and didn't mean to say that, but the guy sat next to me, or sat behind me last night, he said lucrative when he meant to say ludicrous. And he eventually came back to ludicrous because he was complaining, and he said it as if like I didn't mean to say it. That's the word I meant to say. But the ludicrous thing for me was it goes down to 10 men, and he never switches up that shape. He doesn't even need a bold manager. He needs an astute manager to go like, well, we'll just dominate further up the pitch. This gives me an opportunity to do that, and he just didn't do it. That's a red flag, right, Paul? That to see that lack of, and we've talked about his in-game management before, but you react to the rhythm of a game. Old Trafford needs proactivity. It needs. I'm not saying you always need to gamble, but that wasn't a gamble. That was a situation to seize the advantage. We didn't do it against Chelsea, and when it was there for the taking, and we didn't do it last night. And we gave Everton exactly what they wanted when they were down to 10 men. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, he could have done something. I mean, I look at it is that he brings on Dalot, but he could have actually just maybe gone to what he done. He could have just gone to a 4 and just had Luke Shaw as a left back, and virtually just got him further forward, because Luke Shaw looks a little bit more dynamic than a Dorgu or a Dalot in that position when he's out in wide areas, and you know that he can, with a bit of space, deliver the ball. And that's one thing that lacks. Don't put enough balls in the box early enough. Always too late. Always having to wait, to everyone to get back, and then try and knock something in, curling in towards the goal. And when you've got the centre half that Everton have got, they're brave and they'll come and head them out and maybe head them on beyond oncoming players for a counter, is what they've done on a few occasions. But I do look at what he does. He does need to change it. He does need to change it and react. And no one would complain about his system. No one would, if they could see that he was changing it in game. Players were stepping forward, or he'd actually, like that situation, taken a player off and not gone like for like, as he always does. There was just nothing was changing. And I think at the end of it, things were just happening in the end. It looked better at the end just because Everton had virtually sunk as far back as they could in the end. They couldn't do any more. They're virtually saying, we've done all that now, we're running out of steam, we're just going to sit in there, and what we're going to allow you to do is maybe have a couple of efforts knowing that we've got a goalkeeper who's the best shot stopper in the league.
Yeah.
And that's what happened really in the end. And you can't live off that, couple of good saves that Jordan Pickford made. You have to look at the whole game, and the whole game for a Manchester United performance will go down as one of the worst. There was a game at Goodison a few years ago, wasn't there, under Ollie, which was a sheer embarrassment.
Yeah.
This one at home, without the goals involved of it, is just almost as equal in the performance-wise.
Yeah, it's a damning one. As Matt says here, has to be the worst performance I've seen, I think, which is a really bad comment. There's been a few contenders for that over the years. There's no excuse from the players. 5-yard misplaced passes, a lack of effort and a lack of tempo. And Vicky saying there, last night's game was exactly what we saw last year. When you play 10 men, you don't continue to have 2 in midfield. It's yours for the taking. And this is exactly the thing. Go on, Dave. I mean, you've been quite biting your tongue there on the manager. You only said he should be sacked twice in the first rant. So he just didn't react to it last night. In that we've seen it before. He can talk about the player. Well, like I said, I'm going to talk about the way that he talks in a minute. He can talk about the feeling and everything like that. But when the system's not working as it is, or the formation's not working as it is, to then have a numerical advantage for so much of the game. And we saw he did exactly the same against Chelsea. Didn't switch it up, didn't seize it. At one point, I'm thinking, Casemiro's going to get sent off here again, just to level it up. And we might have been better off playing 10 against 10. But I just don't understand. There was no reaction apart from the like-for-like swaps, which is just bizarre. You would, and like I said, it's not a gamble. It's just at that point it would be sensible game management.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure David Moyes is waking up this morning still with a smile on his face, thinking, how did we get out of there 1-0 after being down to 10 men for, if we had extra time, like over 80 minutes. And he got away with it because our manager is clueless. Our manager just refuses to change the way he plays. And I mean, everyone and anyone would know that when the opposition team goes down to 10 men, the best thing you do is just use your wingers, use the wings and stretch them. And they're lost at that point to 10 men. They become overstretched. But if you look at that match back again from last night, when they went down to 10 men, we actually got worse and they got better. Because I think Moyes was just sitting there thinking, why does he still have 5 defenders on the pitch when, it's the 13th minute, player just got sent off, and then they go and score like, I don't know, 10 minutes later, and we still didn't change it. We didn't change it at half-time. And then he brings on Dallo for Dorgo, who was, wasn't having the best game at all. But to still go into the 80th minute with the same system in place, 5 defenders, Everton just... I mean, I really couldn't believe what I was seeing because, like I said, for the last 20 minutes, I think Everton dug in. But from the time they got the player sent off to the last 20 minutes, they were still coming at us and still attacking because we gave them that opportunity by just sitting back with 5 defenders. It was very disturbing to see a Manchester United manager, coach, or whatever we want to call him these days, still sit on that sideline and watch that crap and still think that that's okay and that's acceptable. That, like I said earlier on, he didn't take any chances. I mean, we have a very young, Shea Lacey on the bench. Why bring him into that environment and not even bring him on? That was an ideal opportunity. Xerxes was, my God, what is wrong with that lad? I've no understanding how he stayed on the pitch that long. I really don't. Where we have a kid that would have busted a lung for the last 10, 15, 20 minutes. Threw Mainu to lambs to the slaughter. He was bringing Mainu on in that situation, because I know he's going to get a bit of heat for it because his performance wasn't great. But to get back to the manager, there's literally no excuses for that performance last night. But then, they roll him out in front of the cameras. He tells us how disappointed he is, how great the fans are. I'm sorry, if he has if we have any ambition at all, this shouldn't continue. It really shouldn't. It really shouldn't continue.
Yeah. How would you feel about that, Paul? Because, I mean, everyone was talking about these, that run of games where we won a couple in a row. It's like, oh, well, this is, it's starting to pick up. And then there were the draws, and we've been on this podcast and we talked about the draws. And I was like, when we were previewing the games, we were saying these teams have been so poor at home. But then afterwards, you're saying, oh, well, we got late equalizers, and you can see, we were talking about them. We'll see the value of whether or not these are good confidence boosting draws with the late equalizers when we get to the next result. And the next result and performance was this, which tells you that those draws were awful draws, and that the performances, we were right to be concerned, because those two wins now look like the red herrings. I don't want to be too fatalistic here and go like, oh, we've gone like 5 steps back. I know like what Dave's saying, to cut our losses already and everything like that. But I mean, where are you? I mean, we're talking a year in charge now, and this was that run of games was the most optimistic we've been, which tells you everything. It's so poor, apart from the Europa League final, and that was on by virtue of just getting there, that we'd had that Europa League run, but there was never been a consistent run of games where we've gone, this looks like it's turning. And we never even thought that in this 5-game run, we never thought that. But we get here, we get to this game, and it's like people are saying, it's one of the worst that they've seen. What do you say into, I mean, where Dave's been, he's been on banging that drum all year about uncertainty over the manager. Do you feel like, obviously that's not going to be enough to make the change, there's going to have to be more results on the back of that, but it's certainly worrying to say that that kind of performance has crept back in.
Yeah, it's come back in, and the problem is now is, well, I'm certainly doing it. I'm thinking about when January comes around, when there's a couple of players, the ones really who make opportunities are going to disappear for for anything from 2.5 weeks to a month. You worry about that situation, about where goals are going to come from, where goals are going to, where opportunities are going to be made. How are the other players going to feel when those players go? What are their beliefs? Where are they going to be with their heads? Wondering about winning games of football. He needs a lot of help in January, the manager. He needs help. There was an opportunity when they were playing well, and you look at it, you think to yourself, if we can just get to January and just building it, just add that one little spark to lift everyone. That could be, this season could be the one where, given the standard of the league, that they could finish in top 4.
Yeah.
Now for me, it's looking. I turned around at the start of the season. I said I believe they'll finish in the top 8. I still stand by that. Looking how this league is, I have to, because if they can't finish in the top 8 this season, then this will put it down, in my opinion, worse than last season, because this ain't good. When you look at, they've had 3 opportunities to get in the top 4. Forest, Tottenham, and this one, they've failed.
Yep.
Everton lose that. Everton don't win that game. They're like about 2 points above a relegation.
Yep.
So that's where the league is at the moment. Now they're a point behind now, Everton, aren't they? If that's correct, or the same. It was all in my head last night, but it's gone now, because I have to move on to Crystal Palace, which is a worry. But it is again another concern when you look at who they play at the weekends and the expectations, what the fans are feeling about it. They'll all be worried knowing that defeat there, all of a sudden their whole complexion changes. Everything that happened previous goes away. The manager starts again, and then you're looking then to get to the end of the season and hope that something happens in the summer. But as it's proven that the majority, quite a few of those players are not up to the level to play for Manchester United, because you're looking for that team over 3 games to go and make a statement. and they've failed against three teams that a Manchester United team of note would have taken 9 points from.
Yeah.
And they've gone and failed again, Wayne. They've failed, and there's no consistency. There's nothing there. There's nothing there to keep them going to do the hard yards. And I think a few of them got found out last night looking that way.
Yeah. And not for the first time either. So I want to talk on what the manager's comments were after the game. I'll read them verbatim, so I'm not misquoting him. He was asked about protecting the players but taking responsibility for it. He said, "When I say it's my responsibility to explain the game, and today was not one mistake of one individual, it was the team. The way we see the results of the weekend, we should get inside the pitch with a different excitement. That is my feeling. It doesn't matter if you're playing well, making good passes, but the feeling." And Old Trafford was there saying, "We are all here to give a big step up, and I felt we were not ready again. These 5 weeks, everyone was praising our evolution. I'm always saying the same things. We are not even near the moment we are supposed to be in this club." And he did, to be fair, he has been saying that. But I can't help but feel that that's concerning that a manager comes out and speaks like that, because he's had a year in charge and he shouldn't be, that he's responsible for that feeling. He's the one responsible for that feeling, right? That another players take responsibility for the performance, but he's responsible for the environment. He can't. If there's a bad egg in there, fair enough, but you've had 2 opportunities to get those bad eggs out, and he's shifted a lot of players out. He's probably going to be allowed to shift Kobe Mainu out, which is unforgivable. But it's still going to be able to happen because he's been allowed to do this the way that he wants. So my point is, like, I know that he's taking the responsibility for it, and he does come out and say that. But it's all right saying that after every defeat, but where's the ultimate responsibility then? Because, like, you can't just keep saying, "Oh, I'm responsible. I'm responsible." Yeah, you are. So come on, because it's enough. See change, because there's no progress in what his approach has been. There's been no evidence apart from, we've said 2 games there where you say this is something to hang your hat on, something that looks like a direction moving forward. Like I said, the one thing that felt like was true in the last couple of weeks was that the players didn't look like strangers in the formation. And maybe they didn't look like strangers last night, but they also didn't look like they were capable of playing to the best of their own ability in the system that they were in the way that they were told to play. And some people say it shouldn't be that simple. Well, when Van Nistelrooy came in for a couple of games and changed it up from what Ten Hag was doing, those players were liberated. You look at what Solskjaer did when he came in from when Mourinho was sacked; those players were liberated. There is a liberation of those players to play on the pitch in a formation that suits them in a way that they're told to play. That they're better than, and those players are certainly better than what we saw last night, because that is a group of players that, like you said, Paul, perhaps their time has been and gone, but in this league, they're certainly good enough to challenge for a Champions League qualifying spot. And now you've got to point the finger at the system. So you'll look at this comment here from When the Seagulls Follow the Troll. It says, Amrim Shaw and Bruno Dallo out. I'm not going to go on to that. We've already talked about it. I'm giving you a comment in there, but I want to talk about, Dave, the way that he talks, because I think the way that a manager talks at United, especially since Sir Alex retired, is a big thing. And I know that there's a language barrier, like there has been with Ten Hag, and sometimes things are going to be misconstrued or whatever. But I think there's enough clarity in what he's saying that we can understand what he's saying. And I think sometimes the negativity, like saying this is the worst team, you say things like that for shock value, right? This is the worst United team ever. You can only go there once. It's a nuclear option to press that button to get a reaction. He didn't get the reaction because he didn't have enough A in the bank at United or B in the bank in his own managerial career to go, like, no, I can. The only thing that he had going for him was that I've got the time in the job to make sure that your careers don't last here if you don't pull your socks up. And to be fair, he moved some of those players on. But he's been there repeatedly, goes there time and time again, saying bad things and negative things, saying, there's going to be a storm coming, and, it's going to be a struggle in January because we don't have the players, all these kind of things. He's forecasting there's going to be struggle. when you shouldn't be talking like that. You shouldn't be saying that the next 8 weeks. We know, we can see. We knew that it was going to be a struggle up front with Joshua Zirkzee. Don't predict it for us. We don't need 8 weeks of knowing that this is going to be difficult. And I look back at when we looked at David Moyes. Can you remember when David Moyes was in charge, Dave? And it was the first one he said was something like, "We aspire." No, he said, "We're going to make it difficult for Newcastle," and Newcastle came and won 1-0. And then after City battered us at Old Trafford, he said, "That's the level that we aspire to be." When we were still reigning champions, Mourinho said many things. One of the things he said was something like, "I sat here and eliminated United 3 times." He really talked down the club. And look, we've given him the benefit of the doubt with the way that he's talked, because I think a lot of us talking standards and we say, well, those standards need to be reset and those hard messages needed to be sent. But how many times can you be this negative and say things like that, especially when your on-pitch message is exactly the same? I think all things considered, that's probably my biggest concern with the manager. I know it's going to be a concern for you as well, Dave, but I just thought I'd bring up the topic. How concerned are you about the way that he conveys those messages and puts them across?
Well, as I said earlier on, from a motivational standpoint, you're a professional footballer. You shouldn't need your coach to motivate you. And I do know that coaches do, have a big influence in the dressing room in regard to motivation and geeing people up. But those players last night were it was a shambles. It was like having 8 or 9 Marcus Rashfords running around. They just lacked any type of enthusiasm, and that's on them. But the problem, I have a couple of problems with Amarin. Number one, there's way too many interviews. I think he's done more interviews in a year than every manager combined. It's ridiculous.
And he said when he joined, "I don't want to be doing these interviews all the time." He said something
and he does 2 or 3 or 4 a week. It's absolutely ridiculous. But then he comes out and he said that last night he was he said that he was basically responsible for the motivation of the team and the players, and then in the next breath says we're shit, and we're terrible and we're this and we're that. I'm like, does this guy actually did he ever Google the word motivation and understand what it means? Because on one hand he's saying he's responsible for motivating the team and having the spirit. And the next he's saying the storm is coming, we're crap. This is the worst United team ever. Oh, but the fans are great because, he kind of catches himself then and goes, oh, at least I'll keep somebody on my side. But we're not idiots. We can see right through him. He's just way in over his head, and it's just gutter talk right now. All he does is rolls out, spouts this absolute nonsense. If you didn't know football, or you didn't watch it, and you sat somebody down and watched one of his interviews, maybe 2 or 3 of them, and you asked for his opinion, that person would probably tell you, oh, he wants to be fired by the way he's talking. And that's the way it looks. It looks like he just wants to be fired. It's either that or he's just very, very silly in the way he thinks. And that portrays out onto the pitch as well, with his absolute refusal to do anything with that team in regard to positions and the system. But to get back to the interviews, I thought we hit rock bottom with David Moyes and the Man City remark. This guy goes to a different level every other week. He really, really does. It's terrible. It is. It's terrible the way he portrays himself. And I'm stunned that no one at Manchester United hasn't sat him aside and said, I took him aside and said, listen, you're coming across really bad. You got to stop being so negative, because you can't be negative on one hand and then try and say that you're the one that's responsible for the motivation and to gee the people up and make sure everything is great and we have that big spirit in the team, and then in your next breath you're saying, well, we're shit.
Yeah, thanks for that. How can you go from saying silly, a nice PG word, and then you drop the S-bomb in, which means I have to change the rating of the podcast? That's just unprofessional of you, Dave. Thanks for that. And I will call him out. I will tell him off live on air because he shouldn't be doing that, and he's made me do it before. Paul, I'm not going to talk about the manager's comments. I do want to talk about the farcical red card. I don't know where I stand on getting sent off for sending off for giving a slap to your teammate. Remember, there was a historical story where Martin Buchan clipped Gordon Hill around the ear. We've seen a few of them over the years. Law and Steve McManaman, was it in the 90s? We saw definitely one of the players was sent off for Blackburn when Batty and Lasso in the Champions League game. I'm sure it was those.
Newcastle, wasn't it? Batty and
Newcastle was Bowyer and Dyer.
Bowyer, yeah.
So it's happened a few times, Paul. I mean, first of all, your view on the red card. Second of all, has that ever happened on a pitch with you?
There's been when players have squared up and the old chest has come out, but no one's ever. I've never been involved in a game on a pitch where players lifted a hand to his teammate. It hasn't happened. There's been a little bit of pushing and shoving, but I look at it. There was an incident just before that where I can't think of two players, and there was a little bit of a scuffle went on. Oh, it was involving Zerkzee and Tarkowski, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Zerkzee, he kept on, and I turned around and said the referee's done well there, because it is easy for a referee, given how today they are robots, that they could just straight away give yellow cards out and just say, look what we've done. And then when that one happened, and I saw what's going on, and I think in the end, Gay, I think if it wasn't for Pickford, because he looked really rattled when Pickford got hold of him, he suddenly got more aggressive. But it was a slap that done it. I think the referees have got to get back to communication skills. Because the one thing, if you're a nightclub bouncer, you look at these people now, well, it's about communication. They want you to talk to people rather than straight away knock them out, or anything you think you've got to do as a bouncer, or call the police, try and talk to him or something. But he didn't. He just straight away, standing from a distance, it was a petty slap. If he's turned around, if he comes out and says, I gave him the red card because I was embarrassed about him slapping his teammate, then that might help him get away with it, because it wasn't. If that happens in rugby, the player should hang his head in shame and walk off the pitch because he's gone and slapped a teammate round the face. So it should have been treated that way, and he should have felt, in my opinion, the embarrassment to stay on that pitch, knowing what all his teammates know, what he's gone and done to Keane, because it was embarrassing on Gay's part. But I think the referee was too quick, and given how the result of that game and the performance, there was a chance that maybe United might have stood better against 11 men than 10.
Yeah. But we were all sat there like, what on earth has gone on there? Couldn't make it out. And like, maybe the worst thing is because there was like maybe 20 seconds before. I know he was quick with the red card, but it wasn't. There was still a bit of a. They were carrying it on before, and I think if they had not carried it on, they might have got away with it. If it had just been like a slap in isolation, but there was a little confrontation afterwards, But
there was an incident. I can't remember the opportunity again. What happened, but that's what it stemmed from. The opportunity coming. I think he was having a go at Keane for what he allowed to happen.
Yeah,
he went too far. Keane's come back, and his idea of it is to go and confront him and walk into his face. You have rows with players, and you cuss them, and you tell them to do one, and then within a couple of minutes, something happens, and Incy and Keno were the best of them ones. When they done it, they'll go and do something. Within come back a couple of minutes, you might just go and do something good or something happen, and all of a sudden you just look back at her and you get a smug little smile where you really want to go and clench your fists and punch them, but you laugh with them because it's put to bed straight away. Those things. It really surprised me. You was at the ground and you missed it. I was there watching it, and I was doing it off tube for the radio. And even I, and as much as I could do, the bit that it never showed, I never saw the incident where United made it. I can't remember what incident it was. There was an opportunity made. The ball went across the face, and then the cameras panned straight there. Never showed the full replay again to get a gist of what the argument was or to see who was really at fault. I'm saying it was something regarding Keane, only because of what I read this morning.
Mm-hmm.
So Gay was having a go at Keane. So
yeah, it was to do with a misplaced pass in the box to give United an opportunity, and obviously social media is great for dragging up past games, and seemingly Keane, has done that a few times now over the past season. And I think that's why the player reacted at him to say, like, this is not the first time you've nearly given away a goal in the box. When I seen it on television, I was baffled. I was completely baffled. I'm like, why is he sending him off? And there was only one specific angle that Sky showed that you could actually see him raising his hand. Because up until then, every other angle, it was like, why isn't Keane getting sent off? He's the one. He looks like he's the aggressor. I mean, I know the letter of the law says if you raise your hand in any way, shape, or form and touch any player's head, face, or whatever, you got to go off. So, I mean, I'm not going to be overcritical of the referee. I think to him, it was just a letter of the law. But I think common sense should have prevailed there to say, if it was him against, Xerxes, you could understand him getting sent off. But when you slap your own player and in that kind of like confrontational thing where they're just butting up against each other and venting frustration, I think the ref, he definitely should have used more of his common sense to go, hey, calm it down.
No, but you got to remember, though, that when you become a referee, Dave, there's an operation that takes away common sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I'm not one for bias on this podcast, people know, but he obviously wanted Everton to win, knowing now United play against 10 men, so he sent him off. We'll move on to different stuff. So Vicky says, morning, Vicky, thanks for your comments this morning. She says she's 80% of the way through the Manchester United after Munich. It's an insightful book. Thank you very much for plugging and plugging the book for me, so I don't have to do it. Really appreciate that. It's out, available now everywhere. So that's a little plug. Everyone's saying about Roy Keane. I'm sure I recall a few incidents where Keane slapped players after they scored. So, just a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. Before we preview Crystal Palace, today is the anniversary of 2 deaths in United history. Bill Foulkes passed away in 2013, and the big one, of course, everyone remembers because it's 20 years today, is George Best, who passed away 20 years ago today. In my mind, the greatest player that ever played the game, let alone for Manchester United. Stories of his wizardry and his genius are, the legendary, aren't they? Everyone's got a tale about George Best. And most of those people write books about this. So, like if someone spent a summer knowing George Best, they end up writing a book about it, I didn't even know him, and I wrote a book about him. Scored some great goals, and also the most important goal in United history, the one that won the European Cup in 1968. Great line from Alex Stepney when I interviewed him for that. He said that he was, in his heart and soul, the spirit of the Babes, which I thought was really nice because it's poetic in the way that he describes George being one of the players to come through in that famous youth team after the crash, and scoring the goal in the way that he did. I'm not going to let Dave comment because he doesn't think that George is the best of all time, so I'm not going to allow that kind of slander here. It's a bit of Ireland bias, I think. If it came from the Republic, then I think there might be a different item on the agenda. But Paul, like I said, everyone's got a George Best story. I want to tell the story of when he picked you up at Fulham and took you back to your house, because I love that story.
I'm trying to think when it was. I would have been about 15. It's when he came to Fulham, and it was him and Rodney Marsh and Bobby Moore. I'm trying to think who else was there as well. I think Alan Slough. I think Alan Mullery was there as well. Fulham, but those 3 were definitely there. And George was with Angie and lived in Southend. And I'm out that way going out to Wessex. So George Best said he'll take me. He can drop me off. So I've had to direct him as we come off, because I was just off the main road, which the main road then was the A13 to Southend. and across at my mum's, and my mum still lives in the same house, which we moved out of East London to when I was 5. We moved there, and he dropped me. And he was in a lay-by, pulled into the lay-by, and it's a busier road now, but then the moment a car pulls over, especially then it was a Jag, everyone's windows twitch. So I tried to cross over the road, and I crossed over, and you just say, you wave and thank you. I get to the door, and my mum just said to me, that was George's best, yeah, and she whops me round the head and has a go because I never invited him in and never got to meet him or anything like that. But I was just a 14, 15-year-old kid. I didn't know George Best as George Best. I just didn't know. I didn't have a clue. I had a clue, but especially, when he comes to Fulham, the club I was with as a schoolboy, and, there's all those bits with him and Rodney Marsh. But I was that little bit naive about it in the sense of his history, about everything about him. My mum, she went absolutely mad at me about it. And the funniest thing is, though, that when I signed for United, I spent a bit of time in the Midland Hotel. Yeah. And George used to come into the Midland Hotel because the manager of the hotel was something McCarthy. But anyway, he used to come in, and George used to sit. We had a big foyer through the doors, and nice big foyer in the lifts there, and chairs all in front. And I remember George had his little entourage with him. His girlfriend at the time there was with him. And I come down the lifts, and George was just sitting outside there, just sitting in the big area. And you could see everyone going to the reception desk, and they're looking across, and I'm just sitting there, and we're chatting away. And we talked about that moment. But then there was another fella there. He's one of Brian Robson's mates. He used to have a shop in town, clothes shop, which I used a lot. His name was Phil Black, and his wife was there, and there was someone else and their wife. And George Best used to drink this brandy, Louis XIV brandy. Then in the 90s, it was about 1,400 a bottle, but the bottles were absolutely beautiful, cut glass in that kind of Matthias Rosé shape, but bigger, and all cut glass, all little edging on it. And he had a finished one, so he gave it to one of the women and said, "You can use that for your shampoo." So he got some more, and it was the brandy, and he poured out some brandy, and he gave it to me. Have I told you this before, Wayne?
Yeah, it's in the book.
Yeah. And he gave it to me, and I'm just there, and I've got this brandy. Now I'm completely different now because I get it. I give him this brandy, and I'm just sitting there, just totally kind of out the conversation. And he just looked across at me. He goes, "You're right. You look like you're looking for someone." Yeah, I said, and there was a woman in there called Jerry, who I got to know very well. And I said, "I'm just looking for Jerry, just to get some Coke." Bang! It's gone. What I had was taken away from me. Even then, I was 27 years of age and totally naive about brandy, because it was just. I was still in that kid's mode. I just didn't have a clue about brandy. So naive, and he just come across, bang, it's gone out my hands and put down on the table, and like virtually, there was going to be nothing was going to damage that brandy.
I love that. Yeah, that's in the book. I love the stories about it. But he went out of his way to welcome you as well. I mean, he's dead nice with you as well. A really good guy.
Yeah, he was an absolute lovely man. What everyone says about him is just that he was so humble, and that's exactly how he was. He could just one of those people that he could just disappear, but he was never allowed to disappear. People would pull him to the front all the time. And that was him, and that's on a few occasions, seriously few occasions of meeting him, I know that he was a very, very humble man.
Yeah. I've been lucky enough to know Callum over the last few years, working on the book and the film with him. And Callum has his own reputation and his history, which he's quite open about. But over the last few years, I think he's really sort of focused on the way that he wants to protect his dad's legacy. It certainly came across that way to me whenever we worked together. Certainly was that way on the film. and the book and various conversations that we've had now. There's a 20th anniversary, I think, with the artist Adi Whelan. They did Adi Phelan or Adi Whelan. Is an artist who's done these great pieces on George, like pop art, really nice sort of iconic prints of. But I think it's a sort of fitting way for George, like some memorable moments of him on the pitch, but also like iconic images of him done in an artistic way, of course. Well, there was a launch for that at Hotel Football a couple of weeks ago, and there's an event at Old Trafford tonight. I don't know if the tickets are still available for that. There was a limited amount of tickets, but Callum has been helping with that, and it's important for him. And you know what? At the end of the day as well, Callum, just a lad who lost his dad, who happened to be the most famous footballer in the world, and he's, so my thoughts are with him and Angie and, all the family as well, who, he, like you said, Paul, down to earth, helpful guy, he just happened to be the greatest player of all time. And we are lucky that at Manchester United, he played for us and gave us those moments. He also did some great moments elsewhere as well. At Fulham, scored some great goals at Fulham. There was one where against Oldham, I think, in a 5-0 win at Christmas, where the pitch is icy. And a lot of United fans had gone to that game because they were playing at QPR and the game had been postponed. So United fans went across town to watch Fulham play against Oldham. This is a December game, and George scored this like chip in off the bar from 30 yards. It's available on YouTube, that, which is, for Fulham games in those days, in the 70s, to be on, you can still get the highlights on YouTube. Might even get a clip of a young Paul Parker in the crowd if he attended some of those games. I'm not quite sure, but that goal's certainly on YouTube and you can find that out. Okay, so let's talk about next week's game. Paul, you said you're not looking forward to it. Crystal Palace and United Sunday midday. Palace are in Europe, so they've got that commitment. I think Strasbourg on Thursday only, so that's why that game's been moved. They're in an incredible run of form. Surprisingly, when you look at the fixture list, though, they've been quite indifferent. They've got obviously the great result against Liverpool earlier in the season, but they've been indifferent at home. Apart from that, so were Nottingham Forest, so was Spurs. So I've got every expectation that we'll get turned over there. We've had some bad thumpings off Palace in the last couple of years, and the only thing that's really counting for us at the moment, because they've been so good, they're fifth in the league, they're playing so well away from home. The only thing that's counting for us is that they might be knackered from travelling on Thursday, but it's only to France, so I can't imagine that it's going to be that bad from Paul.
No, and to be honest, like I said earlier, they've got players in there who are having maybe the highest, they've never been that high in high in the league, playing for a team that every time they go out, they believe they can win. They're on a massive high. So I don't think fatigue comes into it. For them to be playing in Europe, they can't believe they're playing in Europe. For the fact of being able to play Manchester United at Selhurst Park again, and knowing that everyone believes that they can win, where before, over many seasons, it was always a case of them not getting beat, and if anything, to nick a draw, and there was a big celebration. So fatigue doesn't come into it. They're used to that. And I say the manager doesn't talk that way. He doesn't make big changes. I'll make 6 changes just to prove a point that I'm protecting my players. He doesn't allow that talk. And if you listen to him when he talks, everything is so positive. He never uses the word fatigue or tiredness or resting or changing. And everyone knows he's not going to change. And so if you go into a game thinking that as a player, who you're playing against a team, believing that they're tired, because it's a load of rubbish. Because if you let them start well, it's amazing how quickly that tiredness gets out of your head, it gets out of your muscles, it gets out of everything. Everything about you feels good, especially when you're playing well, when you're coasting, where Palace are at this moment in time. One bad defeat, big defeat, followed by another defeat, that's when it could come in. Because at the end of the day, fitness is about your mind. If your mind isn't right, there's nothing to drive you forward. Palace are driven forward individually and collectively.
Yeah, Dave. It's quite right. Palace have changed as a club. They've won the FA Cup. They used to be that from our experience of them growing up, they were a yo-yo club, going in and out of the Premier League, but they've established themselves as a serious outfit and at a good point in the Premier League as well. Like they've managed to navigate a few sales. I know that they've got some issues with like players like Gay, who's interested in leaving. But they've managed to keep hold of a core of good talent in there for as long as they want them, which is key. Zaha was kept for a long time. Can't think of how many other players, and they've always reinvested that money wisely, like Wan-Bissaka. They've done very, very well. They've got some great players in that team, and United. I was thinking earlier, like what again the best kind of hope that we've got for this. The first being the Strasbourg element that they're playing in Europe on Thursday night, and the second being that they play the same kind of system. But I don't know, Dave. I look at this and I think this is a bad one for the manager. This is a bad one for Ruben Amorim because I think you're gonna see how that system is meant to look with a manager getting the best out of it, as opposed to one who doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, Palace have really come on over the past, 4 or 5 seasons. They're a very, very well-run club, and they basically I put them up there with the likes of Brighton in that regard. They're really on top.
They'll love that, by the way. Palace fans will love that. You've put them with right.
No. I mean, from a very well-run club, they buy well and they sell high, and they invest it wisely. They really do. It's a really, really well-run club. And when you think back to like when Simon Jordan ran that club, it was an absolute circus. But now you look at them and you see where they've come, and they're a very, very dangerous team. They've beaten us 3 out of the last 4 times. We all remember that 4-0 smacking we got there a few years back. I'm very concerned. I don't think, as Paul said earlier on, I just don't think tiredness comes in. If I'm a Palace player and a Palace supporter, I'm looking forward to every single game right now because they are on a high. They really are. And I'll be honest with you. I know we mentioned this earlier on as well, that the league isn't. It's not a great league this year, and each year we seem to say that it seems to be getting less and less more competitive. And I wouldn't be surprised if Palace slid into the top 4. I really wouldn't, because I think it's open for them. We're talking about finishing in the top 8. I can see Palace finishing, I wouldn't be surprised, like I said, they finish in the top 4. I'm concerned about the game this weekend. I really am. We're obviously, I hope Cunha's back. That's the key to a lot of how we play these days. But I am concerned. We don't have, I'm not a fan of saying bogey teams, but if we do have a bogey team, it's Crystal Palace. And it's down to the fact that they are a very, very good side these days, and we're very poor. So, I've got a lot of concerns with the game this weekend. I don't think them playing on Thursday is going to matter, because if you look at Manchester United, we play once a week and we're terrible. So them playing, as I'm sure Paul could attest to this, as a footballer, you just want to play. That's all you want to do. You just want to play. And then when you're playing well and you're getting applauded, you just want to play again. That's all you want to do, and that's the concern for me, is that Palace are on a high. We're down in the gutter, and I don't see anything other than a Palace win this weekend, unfortunately.
Bit harsh to say down in the gutter after one defeat. But Paul, your eyebrows raised a little bit because I realised I went to Dave with the intellectual question, and I shouldn't have done that. Just about the systems, because I mean, I know you've talked a lot about Palace's the way that they play the 3-4-3. The way that Glasner's played it, and the way that he's maximised both the shape and the what do they call it now? The profile of the player, the criteria of the player, their ability to play in the positions and play in different positions in order to get the best out of the shape and the team, as opposed to Amorim, who doesn't appear to be doing that. Rather than go through all that, my point, just to you very quickly before we wrap, is that makes this game a very difficult one for Amorim, right? Because I mean, a defeat and being shown up tactically, there'll be a very damaging defeat for him.
Yeah, I mean, it happened in a certain way last season as well. I didn't get a good view of it because I was a guest of somebody, so I was behind the goal. So I didn't really get a good view of it. But you look at what they've got, and you look at first of all the main bit. The three centre halves. The only one who would fit out of all of what United have got in there would be De Ligt. De Ligt could be their Lacroix in the middle.
Yeah.
And what Lacroix is just an out-and-out defender, proper defender, controls and pass. That's what he does. They've got Richards on the right side, again, control pass. And the one who the playmaker at the back, plays on the left side, Gahey. He's the one who has more than 2 touches, 9 times out of 10. He's the one who finds that pass. All 3 defenders can pass through the midfield. They all can do that. It isn't a struggle. They always look. They never spend so much time on the ball. That's the way I was taught when I played there for QPR in that role. Don't have too many touches when you play that system, especially if you're in the middle. Even if you lend it to somebody and change position, that's a positive. If you just keep going backwards and forwards and 3, 4, 5, 6 touches, it's dead and buried. They're midfield players. They're midfield too. Not great. Not Will Hughes. Will Hughes is a god at Palace. Will Hughes is a good player who has been calmed down. Glasner's come in, made him an even better player.
Yeah.
Incredible. He's in the middle. Walton, another one. And all of a sudden, they've just got energy. They've got players who just move around, with and without the ball. That's all it is. And United, the system works if you haven't got a static team. Otherwise, it's just another way of playing. Bring your full-backs in, the wing-backs in, and play 5 at the back and be negative. And generally, that's what it is because there's no out. Munoz recently talked about playing for Manchester United.
Yeah.
And hell of a player, but he suits Palace. If he comes to United, given everything, I'd worry for him.
Yeah.
I'd really worry for him. Could he be the same? I would say no, because there's not enough players who could get upfield of him because his energy levels are so high. There wouldn't be enough outlets for him. At Palace, he has outlets when he goes forward. He has options to find people. When it goes that way of us, there's not enough options because there's not enough legs in the team. Not enough legs to break forward on a counter. Yeah. See, the only way counters work if Bruno's passing the ball, because Bruno can't join in a counter if he's not. He just hasn't got the legs to get. He's not a box-to-box player. Yeah. Palace have got all athletes. That was my short version, by the way.
Yeah, don't worry. It was a good one. But I should have come to you first. It was a mistake to go to Dave. So that for every question.
Well, my answer would have been simple: is that Palace know how to use that system? We don't. So that's it. That's all you need to know. We're crap at the end. Good at it. What's the next question?
Well, don't worry about that because you'll be leading it next week. It'll be Dave and Paul next week running the rule over that. So all the intellectualism will come from Dave's questions and Paul's answering. I can't wait for that. Well, yeah, that's me off for a couple of weeks on the pod, but I'll be back late December-ish to talk football with these guys. Hopefully United pick up some wins in the meantime. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, guys. And thanks to Dave and Paul for their time this morning. Have a good one.